Hey guys, happy Tuesday. I wanted to do a brief impromptu office visits. I do this when I get a chance, a lot going on. And this is Mr. Colon, Mr. C, and wanted you to reinforce your faith and wanted to go over to some posts to drag that out and maybe highlight some important things about that. Subscribe and like and all that. And let's get started because it is a shorter post today. All right. And then my dog's there in the background. Maybe I can mute him a little bit. Let me see what's going on. He's just playing with his brother. So, my dog. Anyways, so Vatican II status conundrum. So I wanted to talk about that because a lot of people mention that Vatican II is a pastoral council and somehow it doesn't count. But Vatican II, if you go by on paper what it says, it's like any other council. Though, as a conservative, it is not as clear. Maybe it is as clear as people like the Catholic Esquire and others would say that it is actually is clear. We just don't want to accept it. But or there's others that want to see it in light of continuity or in light of tradition, to be not in rupture but in communion with that. But let's see what I previously mentioned through my research here. Normally, assenting with docility is something that we're called to do. That is what the magisterium says. We just accept, even if we don't understand. If they are instituted by Christ, I mean, it makes sense. If it's a human institution, it doesn't, right? Because you want to use your rational mind to, make up for yourself, especially as Americans wanting to be rugged individualists. But being part of that legacy, and if again you have to accept a couple of things, uh, Christ produced a church through St. Peter, and it still continues. And that church is not Eastern Orthodoxy, but it is Roman Catholicism. However, I wanted to mention a couple of things. Like in the past, there have been robber councils that happen, and then later on, there have been rejected and not counted or part of the canon, decanonized, if you will. One of the things I want to mention about Vatican II and why it's so problematic would be the ambiguous language. Subsist in Lumen Gentium, as opposed to the Church of Christ is, just as it subsists in. So, as a notion that there's a larger Church of Christ, a big circle, and then Catholic Church is like 95 and 99% of that circle. It's not does not equal the same thing. We have that it's ecumenical in shifting. It really wanted to make way for Protestants and Talmudic Jews, so it softened its language, which it could be good or bad. I mean, it really depends on the situation. Ultimately, if we want to convert them, sometimes harsh, quote unquote, harsh language has to be used. Religious liberty was redefined. So we're comparing Dignates Humanae in Vatican II versus Quanta Cura. Liturgical revolution. I mean, the different changes in the Mass. And pastoral tone, when presenting dogma, it's not as straightforward, black and white, clear as a council should be, but it is something that it is more ambiguous on purpose. But that's the point. It was on purpose. It could be interpreted later on, maybe through cowardice or the spirit of the age, whatever the spirit. It was just different in the other councils, although similar in some other ways. So that said, these objections, valid as they may be, are often based on private interpretation and not binding on magisterial judgment, although there have been other documents that have clarified some of these, which I did not go into. But now let's go with the rest of the post, which is robber councils. That is, councils that have been made or said to be not that don't count. So it happened in the past. Before, we have the Council of Ephesus in 1449. We have the Council of Hieria, uh, Pisa, leaning town of Pisa and Pistonia, and Vatican II had other things that those didn't. So it really, I mean, even one theoretically could see a pope um, later on having the power to declare Vatican II Robert Council if he thought so, if it was prudent to do so through the Holy Spirit, right? And in each of these posts, I put one book that really kind of explains what's going on in Vatican II, and this Robert de Mattei's book on the Second Vatican Council. We have here 7 statements that really confirms Vatican I's authority. The first 3 are Pope Pius the 11th, Casti Canubi, even encyclicals taught by the ordinary magisterium demand assent. Summarizing paragraph 104, Pope Pius the 12th. Even doubtful matters, no individual may pass judgment on the Pope. So really straightforward. These, especially those 2, as they are pre 1958, so it would count for traditionalists. And then post 1958, what this talks about councils and more specifically about if they count or not. Pope John the 23rd, the first pope after Pope Pius the 12th, our first Novus Ordo pope in a sense. Even though Novus Ordo came a little later after the council. He had the spirit of the Novus Ordo, I guess. Pope Pius the 23rd says there's certain and unchangeable doctrine to which a faithful assent must be given. Talking about really the council there. And then 4, in the council document itself, Lumen Gentium, religious submission of mind and will must be shown even when it's not ex cathedra, just basically, again, that docile submission aspect of it. We have Pope Paul VI talking about Vatican II belongs to the magisterium and rejecting it dishonors the Holy Spirit. So we have that in 1976 address by Pope Paul VI. And then in 1983, Code on Canon Law, JP2's Code on Canon Law revision, religious submission must be given if not proclaimed definitely. So again, giving you that aspect that even if it's not, we don't go as Catholics saying, there's 2 dogmas we'll have to do with our Blessed Mother. Are those the only things that Catholics believe? No, the Church has other teachings from the scriptures and other things as well. They have different ranks, but we're called to assent to those, even if our understanding is not as clear as it should be. And then we have 7th, but Pope Francis himself, talking about we affirm magisterial authority, that liturgical reform is irreversible, really talking about the changes that have come from the liturgy, that is the Mass. So kind of like a intention with Pope Benedict explaining that the so-called Latin Mass as it is, but then there is so-called extraordinary form versus the ordinary form, like one Mass, 2 different expressions. That's kind of rejected, and even by traditionalists, they would say that's not. Their masses are different. They don't come from one source. Maybe ultimately they do if they all come through the Holy Spirit, but it's not one Mass that got split into 2. It's 2 different masses. For 2 different purposes. It's a work of human hands, says. I don't know if by Father Shikata talk about that book here, but it is a good book, at least in its description of the problem. Summary: Vatican II was in doctrinal in intent, taught via the ordinary magisterium. It is part of the binding of the magisterium. Dissent, it really equals disobedience, reaffirmed by canon law and the popes. And then we have Dr. McInerney's What Went Wrong with Vatican II. And then we have here Ottaviani interventions. This one in the middle is the one by Father Chikara, or his translation and commentary on it. It really talks about how we have to wrestle with the fact that Vatican II, just by normal, plain understanding of the reading what past Pope says, it's part of the Catholic tradition. So I guess either accept it as it is, or like us, I guess, try to wrestle with it and accept it, but it has to be read through the light of tradition, which I think makes the most sense, unless you're going to outright reject it. So just wanted to mention that as our main post there. And what do I have here? Min-maxing the faith. This is really my pillars in a more nascent or more earlier form, talking about the 4 pillars to build up your faith. God exists. Number 1, I further elaborated that he exists, he creates, and he is moral, and that he rewards, and that the bodily resurrection of Jesus Christ, or Jesus the Christ, really emphasizing each of those components: bodily resurrection and Jesus existing, and then bodily and the Christ being the Messiah and what that means as the Son of Man, Son of God. Different titles mean different things, but ultimately pointing to his incarnation and his true status. A couple of great apologetic works. I'm just going to highlight them. Craves and Ticelli's Handbook of Catholic Apologetics. The only knock against it is because they have a Handbook of Christian Apologetics. For Protestants, in the Catholic version, it just add a chapter at the end that makes it Catholic. So it's not really integrated. I wish there was a further revision to really integrate the Catholicism in it. It's not bad. It's like a tacked on. It's like, come on, you could have done better with that. Father Laux, this whole series should be taught one of the main teaching from Catholic high schools and academics. But his series I have here on Chief Truths of the Faith, the Bible, and other things. But Catholic apologetics, just good, solid American pre-1958 material. Christian Apologetics Anthology of Primary Sources, compiled by Protestants, but really good. It really has some of our guys in there, Kraft, Dr. Kraft, and then St. Teresa, St. Augustine. Some of our guys are in there, although Augustine is claimed by almost everyone. So, but either way, a good primary source on Christian apologetics. Then we have Divine Christology and Petrie's Case for Jesus. Divine Christology is written for a Catholic audience. Case for Jesus is written for them, but Divine Christology is more for a broader audience. So he tends to use NRSV and CE and VCE. Very disappointing. I wish he would have held his ground on that, but still a good source, which really highlights either chapter 8 or 9 of Case for Jesus about Christ's Christological claims. And then 2 books on the resurrection, if you want to just dig a little deeper what the New Testament says about that and early Christian sources. And apologetic, not its primary aim, but it does delve into apologetics. That is The Resurrection of Jesus by Michael Licona and The Resurrection of the Son of God by N.T. Wright. And I missed one, and that is Creation Apologetics, what the Catholic Church says in the first 11 chapters, which is the first half, the primeval or pre-Abraham half of Genesis. Father Seraphim Rose's Genesis, Creation, and Early Man, which is something that it is an Orthodox book, but it is a great book. And I have perused it. I have not delved deep in it myself, because I had virtual copies, not a hand copy with me or a physical copy, but it really highlights the notion that our faith is really foundational, and especially the first 3 chapters of Genesis really have a lot of the foundation of what we talk about. And lastly, a couple of things here, just mentioning that if we're min-maxing the faith, the other 2 components is the apostolic tradition and church authority, that it comes from the apostles and that they have also authority, and what did they come up with. And then we also have the real presence and liturgy, and then in the Eucharist, other important aspects. You have those 4 pillars. Everything else really tends to make sense. And Denzinger is a Latin English translation, really gives you a compendium, like a Hester, of the church's teachings and creeds. It's like catechism for if you want to delve deep into the actual sources from there. Faith for the Early Church Fathers, a collection. If you don't want to get the Philip Schaff set, you can get that set instead. Jesus and the Eucharist, another by Petrie. It really highlights the notion of Christ and the Eucharist and the real presence, and how it ties into Judaism at that time. And God is Near Us from Pope Benedict, talking about the Eucharist as well. And the other thing is, for those who are in town, that is in Orlando at Bishop Moore, share this tab. At Bishop Moore School, there's going to be a Young Catholic Professionals meeting, which I'll be attending. So I hope to see some of you guys there. I'll try to go to all the meetings, but I usually go because of interest. This one's a little bit closer to what I want to learn about from Deacon Saska, or Sakasa, I guess, about financial well-being. I usually talk about relationship, health, and wealth being an important component of human relationships. So from a Catholic point of view, maybe he'll talk about tithing and other things. So I hope to be there and see you guys there, and also ask some questions and just get enrichment on my own. Free event. Young Catholic professionals is hit and miss depending on what the subject matter is. It is normie, no order, but I'm sure you can meet some great start the conversation with those who want to get deeper in the faith. So very cool. Subscribe and like, and whether you're on YouTube or X, that way I get to see you guys and interact. And I really hope to be making a difference, be pointing you guys and helping you guys on your journey. So this has been Mr. Cologne, Mr. Slee, and Layman from a little quick impromptu. The weather's acting up and the dogs are acting up, so I'm gonna cut shorter, a little shorter than usual. So subscribe, like, donate, check out my link tree, and yeah, just let's keep this going and try to point people's faith towards Christ, and wherever you are, move forward. If it takes like going to a mass, not, take care, God bless, and be safe.